Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be taking a look at how to maximise the value of your ESOS energy audit and use it as a lever for delivering ongoing improvements within your business. My name is Stephen Kennett and I look after the Energy and Carbon Management channel here at 2 Degrees. I'm delighted to welcome our presenters today. Joining us from DEC is Martin Adams, who will begin by providing a brief overview of the aims and ambitions behind ESOS, where organisations should be now and how the audit can be used as a tool for engagement within organisations. We're also very fortunate to be joined by Donald French, Site Engineering Manager at Yeo Valley Farms, Danny Ball, Energy and Optimisation Project Engineer at Bristol Water, and Andrew Grant, Environment and Audit Manager at AG Bar. They will each give a personal insight into their approach to ESOS, the challenges it raised, and their plans for using the output from the energy audit. Finally, Jez Rutter, Managing Director of JRP Solutions, will take a look at how organisations can get the maximum value from ESOS and provide advice on how to create a holistic energy plan. Before we begin, I'd just like to remind everyone that you can submit questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Just type in your question and press send, and we'll wait till the end before answering as many as we can. As an aside, if you should have any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat box on the right-hand side to send me a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So without any further delay, I'd like to hand over to Martin, who will get us started with today's presentation. So Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much. So, hello, my name is Martin Adams and I am the ESOS team leader in DEC. So I head up the policy team which developed ESOS and is now overseeing its implementation. And this statement from the CBI really captures what ESOS is all about. And we know that businesses want to minimise wasteful use of resources, but too often energy is seen as a fixed cost, and energy waste is less visible to senior managers and businesses. And there are various well-documented market failures that mean action on energy efficiency is slower than we would like it to be and need it to be in terms of carbon emissions. And ESOS is about helping businesses to identify where they're wasting energy and understand how to act upon it to make cost-effective improvements. In so doing, it helps businesses save money, but also is about reducing carbon emissions and helping contribute towards UK action on climate change. And there are multiple benefits to energy efficiency. Beyond those, it can help boost productivity in ways aside from sort of immediate reduction in bill savings. It improves energy security and reduces energy system costs and the need for new generation, which is very important from a debt perspective. And it can have wider societal benefits because reduced emissions can lead to improved health because of better air quality and things like that too. And in the context of the UK's carbon plans and ambition to reduce emissions by 80% in 2050, energy efficiency across both business and domestic sectors plays a really key role. So we estimate that between 20 and around 47% of our emissions reduction will need to come from reductions in energy consumption. And so this is a key part of the current carbon plans and is likely to remain so with the new government, although they're still setting out, work on areas that weren't directly outlined in their manifesto. And we also think that there is very significant cost-effective energy efficiency potential, again, across the economy and particularly in businesses and large businesses too. So large businesses account for only around 1% of the total business population, but around 75% of business energy consumption. So there's a huge prize there that ESOS is able to tap into and help those businesses realise the savings that are there. We recognise that there's a challenge for many businesses, not least because energy is a relatively small cost compared to other overheads. Even for a light manufacturing company, on average, energy costs might be about 3% of overheads compared with staff costs being about 18%. But cumulatively, energy costs and the energy savings from all of industry and business are a massive benefit to the UK as part of efforts to reduce energy consumption. And there is also wider EU context to the ESOS. The ESOS flows out from the EU Energy Efficiency Directive, which is intended to help the EU meet cross-EU targets to reduce energy consumption by 2020, and also going beyond the EU has set indicative targets for 2030 as well. And there's a really clear and important point to make here. Anecdotally, I've read in a few places how some businesses think, oh, ESOS isn't here to stay, it's going to be, government messes around with the agenda and changes policies and it's all going to get moved around again. But actually, just to quash that, ESOS is here to stay. It is set at an EU level that requires there to be energy audits in all EU member states, and there is no sign that it's likely to change. So ESOS is, as far as we can tell in the UK, it is here for good. I would probably be preaching to the choir if I started saying this is what ESOS is and get into details of all of that, so I will avoid doing that, but I think there are 2 points I will highlight about ESOS. Firstly, ESOS applies to every large undertaking and their corporate groups in the UK. That is around 10,000 companies, and they all have a target date to comply by the 5th of December 2015 for the first phase. Now in DEC, we've been doing some regular work and tracker surveys to monitor awareness and compliance with ESOS. And in the last 2 waves, it's been very promising because all but one business out of 200 surveyed have said that they're confident they will comply by the compliance deadline. And I guess my key point, though, is that deadline is only 6 months away, and that confidence is really promising for us, but I would urge businesses to act early in terms of securing a lead assessor or getting someone trained up in-house, because you don't want to be the only person come autumn who suddenly realises they can't get the assessor they want because they're already booked up. So there are a lot of people doing ESOS, and it is important to get in there early to make sure that you are able to get the people you want doing it or do it in the way you want to do it and don't end up feeling rushed towards the deadline. But also, when we have been developing ESOS, we have been thinking about this very much from a business perspective and how to make the scheme work for you and allow you to comply in a way which goes with the grain of what you're doing anyway. So just to recap, when we designed the scheme, it was about putting business first. We had a very collaborative approach. We had an open door policy for meetings. I don't think we turned down a single meeting when someone asked to meet with us to discuss the scheme. And we had a cross-industry expert panel which met every 2 months, and we held workshops across the UK. And that panel brought together experts from industry and from the energy auditing businesses too, as well as trade bodies. And the aim of all of that was to make sure we came up with a scheme which did what ESOS is all about, which is actually helping businesses identify ways to save money and save energy. And then in terms of that, it's led to 3 key principles that underpinned our design of ESOS. And I think as you're complying with the scheme, it will be really helpful for you to think about how you can use these to your advantage when determining your approach. And firstly, ESOS is actually in law a very simple scheme in terms of what you're required to do. But there's a challenge to participants and to all of you to work out how you can make ESOS meaningful for your company. Because ESOS, essentially the law says you must have energy audits that come up with costed savings. At a lot of workshops I've been to, people have asked for guidance on how many site visits they should undertake or what level of granularity audits should go to. But actually the legislation doesn't impose specific requirements on businesses in those areas. And at the end of the day, the answer is that it's up to the business and the lead assessor you work with, whether externally or internally, to determine and agree what is meaningful for a particular company. It depends on what you need the audits to do to help you identify savings and help you add value to your organisation. You have a huge amount of discretion there and should really take advantage of it. And there's no point government saying you must audit X% of sites. It would be a one-size-fits-all approach which wouldn't work for lots of businesses. And we also don't want to make very specific requirements around the measurements or around a particular technology or process that you should focus on when there might be lots of reasons you might not want to focus on it. And so with ESOS, do remember this is about you deciding and working with the lead assessor to determine where an audit will add value to you, how much depth will add value to you. You might want to focus on particular areas but do something very high level on others. That's fine. So use it as an opportunity. Think about what you want to achieve from it rather than thinking about, should I do it this way, should I do it that way, what's going to be okay with the law, because actually the legal requirements are very straightforward and simple. Secondly, again, we've designed ESOS with the intention that you shouldn't be starting from scratch. Many businesses are already doing things either under existing regulation or just as a matter of good practice already. And so I think the first thing any ESOS participant should do is think about what they've done over the last 4 years that can contribute to their compliance to the first phase, whether that be audits or business cases, improvements made and measured under climate change agreements or management systems, data collected under other schemes. In all likelihood, and particularly because you're the kind of participants on this call, so I think I'm preaching to the choir here, you will not be starting from scratch. And ESOS is about making sure that you multiply good practice, and we don't want to make you reinvent the wheel. And finally, clearly ESOS is about trying to minimise compliance costs. We've avoided going beyond what we considered and constantly agree with the minimum requirements of the EU directive. But it's just also about, using the approaches outlined above, using in-house lead assessors where appropriate, or conducting work in-house and having people review it. It's about really trying to focus on that, which is making sure that you're able to embed this into your sort of good practice day-to-day work in order to comply and then realise those benefits. And we've sought to do that throughout the scheme. ESOS isn't about mandating a specific process, but allowing businesses to use their own approaches, to use what works for them to comply with the principles and the framework underpinning the scheme. Ideally, in future phase of ESOS, I'd like to see all companies embedding ESOS so that come 2019, it isn't about sort of conducting lots of audits by the deadline. It's about businesses who over the last 4 years have been making energy management practice, energy auditing, just a way of business as usual activity. I think, using in-house lead assessors, developing those skills and trying to make this as part of what you do day to day is a real opportunity, particularly for future phases of the scheme. But there is a key point as well as the sort of messages from the consultation we received, which is a message back to businesses. Again, lots of people have been cynical about the benefits that ESOS will bring. But actually, if companies just save their reduced energy consumption by just 0.1% or 0.7%, that would cumulatively save over £250 million a year. And actually, we think there's a much greater level of technical savings available out there, which can be cost effective too. So I think the real challenge to businesses is that the tool to help you save money. I think you can actually exceed expectations around the savings that can be realised through the energy audit. And anecdotally, people I've spoken to who are already well on their way to compliance are saying, well, actually, even for us, we thought we were doing a lot, but we're finding audits throwing up new opportunities in areas we haven't considered. But all of these audits will just be a burden on you unless you think about them from a process from the outset of thinking, how am I going to use these to comply, but then to actually implement the savings. And that implementation is voluntary, but it's the most important bit, because it is only if you think about how you can take ESOS from an audit through to implementation that you will be able to get these benefits. I'm going to stop talking there and then hand over to our other speakers, but there'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end, I hope.
Great. Thank you very much, Martin. So we're now going to go into the 3 personal perspectives, and to start us off is Donald French from Yo Valley Farm. So, Donald, over to you now.
Thanks, Stephen. Hello, everyone. So my role at Yo Valley is engineering, compliance and environmental management, and I work in the central functions of the business. So, Yo Valley. We are a dairy business. Now, I'm having difficulty with my slides here, Stephen. You may want to move these along for me, if that's all right.
Yep, I'll take control of your slide pack and
all right.
Say next slide each time you want me to forward.
Lovely. Next slide. So you should be looking at a slide that shows, that has a map on it. I'm not quite seeing what you're seeing, everyone. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so Yo Valley, we are a dairy business. We produce yogurt, ice cream, desserts and milk, and we're based in the southwest. So we operate 4 manufacturing sites, 2 logistics sites and a head office. And I'm talking to you today from Blagdon, which is just south of Bristol in the Yo Valley in the Mendip Hills. We're an ISO 14001 accredited business, but we're not 50,000 currently. We're a family-owned business. We employ 1,800 people, and we're the largest independent dairy business in the UK. And our environmental strapline is that we're committed to sustainable British agriculture and manufacturing. Slide 3, please. So, quite early on in the process, we recognised the importance of understanding how ESOS affects us, considering how our business is structured as regards corporate groups, parent groups, wholly owned subsidiaries, etc. So briefly, at the top of this company tree, Yo Valley Group Limited is a corporate group as defined in the Companies Act, and as the highest parent, Yo Valley Group Limited acts as the so-called responsible undertaking for the purposes of ESOS. In the middle of the tree there, Yo Valley Farms Production Limited, who I work for, is the part of the group that qualifies for ESOS as we employ more than 250 people and we have an annual turnover well in excess of 50 million euro. So on the left-hand side, Yo Valley Direct, that's a chilled food distribution service, and Yo Valley Fruits on the right is an organic fruit processing business that supplies organic fruit conserves into our yogurt business and elsewhere. So although Yo Valley Direct and Yo Valley Fruits don't meet the conditions for qualification, they do qualify for participation in ESOS because they're part of a corporate group which includes another undertaking that meets the conditions, namely Yo Valley Farms Production Limited. Next slide, please. So we're already a reasonably proactive business in terms of environmental monitoring and targeting. So the data for our energy audits was really easy to collate. So we consume energy in the usual ways in the form of electricity, natural gas, kerosene, gas oil and diesel for transport. And our energy bill is in the region of £4.5 million currently. So some notes on the figures there. We selected a reference period calendar year 2014 because we had the data and it's the most recent data that we have. There was a little bit of uncertainty about conversion factors for oils, but we eventually realised that the relevant data is all readily available from various websites, so that was easy to get hold of. And all of our kilowatt hour figures are billed quantities, which is a requirement of ESOS. So we made the mistake initially of expressing electricity usage in primary terms, and we're used to doing that because that's how we report our climate change levy consumptions. But our consultant JRP put us straight on that, and we changed to delivered electricity in the end. And next slide, please. So this slide just simply illustrates how we've been able to de minimis transport from our audits. Transport conveniently comes in at just under the 10% threshold for de minimis. We use fuel and transport mostly in our shuttle lorries, which move product from our manufacturing sites to our chill store warehouses. We're not responsible for the fuel consumed to get the product from our chill store warehouses to the retailers. The retailers are responsible for collecting product via their own transport. So we've not had to include that fuel in our ESOS compliance. Next slide, please. So the manufacturing processes on our production sites are all extremely similar, and they all consume electricity in similar ways. So electricity for refrigeration, for lighting, for compressed air, for effluent treatment. And similarly, steam is generated in very, very similar packaged boiler plant combusting either kerosene or natural gas, and it's used for the purposes of pasteurization and cleaning and space heating. So there's a lot of similarity going on between our sites. So we decided early on to carry out a sampling exercise, going back to what Martin was saying earlier about making it meaningful. So we've decided that to make it meaningful, we would select our largest manufacturing site, which is the Blagden site, to audit for the purposes of ESOS, as it's representative of all the other manufacturing sites. Similarly, our warehouse and distribution sites are very, very similar. So we've selected one of the sites, the largest site, which is Isleport, for the purposes of ESOS. And conveniently, within the last 4 years, we've had a thorough energy audit take place at that site, which was conducted by London South Bank University, all around energy efficiency in cold store and chill store warehousing. So we're using that as part of the compliance process. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're not going to repeat that audit. The work has all been done, and there's a very thorough report, and we're acting on the recommendations in that report already. So we're using that as a route to compliance. Next slide, please. Yeah, that slide just really sort of summarising what I've just said about how we use energy on our manufacturing sites. And if you just move on to the next slide, please, Stephen. So what we've done is this information was information we already have. So we track carbon reduction projects that are on the table, that are in the process of being implemented and that have been commissioned, and we do that across all of our sites. So for ESOS, we've really just taken that information, picked out the most relevant potential energy saving projects, and used those for the purposes of compliance. Now, in our case, we generally prefer to appraise financial feasibility based on simple payback, unless the capital investment exceeds about £40,000 or exceeds 3 years payback. The reason that Yo Valley is a family-run, privately owned business with the means to make decisions regarding energy projects pretty quickly, and we're generally able to fund projects without borrowing. So our financial director prefers to take the approach of knowing and understanding how quickly we're going to get our money back expressed in simple payback terms, and that's generally the way we approach things. But we have carried out LCA, again, for the purposes of compliance. So if you move on to the next slide, Stephen. We've done it on LED lighting. LED lighting is something that we've already implemented in some of our chill stores, and there's scope for rolling that out across other chill stores. This LCA is summarising the scenario in our Isleport 2 chill store, and we've used a discount rate of 3%, and there's a net discounted benefit of £126,000. In actual fact, the payback period on that, the simple payback period on that project is less than a year anyway, so it's kind of a no-brainer, and we will proceed with that. With LED lighting in chill stores and cold stores, there's the added benefit, of course, of reducing loading on refrigeration plant, and that contributes to the quick payback period. And if you move on to the next slide, please, Stephen. So in summary, this is our review. We think that ESOS will bring benefits to businesses that don't already have environmental management systems in place. My personal feeling is that it's a bit of an administrative burden for those who do. But having said that, We have found that ESOS has put the spotlight back on the environmental agenda, and we've seen a bit of a renewed drive and interest to reduce energy consumption across our sites because of the introduction of ESOS. I think DEC have done a good job of publicising ESOS because our directors here were made aware of it directly via email, bulletins and invitations to webinars like these without me having to badger them personally, so that's helped me in a way. My personal view is that the second point here is that businesses that employ qualified staff and chartered engineers, etc., and who already manage energy consumption should have been given the opportunity to conduct the audits and verification without having to reach out to consultants. Again, it's a personal view. Martin's probably got his own view on that. Thirdly, the ESOS guidance was great. The LCA example wasn't great in the ESOS guidance. Even in the second edition of the guidance, it was pretty confusing. So businesses that don't do LCA for financial appraisal, I don't think they're going to get much of a clear guide from there. And finally, although LCA can help justify energy projects or not, here at Yo Valley, our directors want to see how quickly they'll get their money back in simple terms, and that's just, again, that's a comment I wanted to make there. But in general terms, ESOS, we're pretty confident ESOS will benefit the business, and if only in the sense that it's put a fresh focus and a spotlight on energy conservation. And that's that. So now I'm going to hand over to Danny Ball at Bristol Water. Thanks very much.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm currently the Efficiency and Optimization Project Engineer at Bristol Water, and I work alongside our Water Resources and Energy Manager. Some key facts about Bristol Water. We supply 1.2 million customers in around the Bristol area. We supply from South Gloucester down to Street Glastonbury across to Weston-super-Mare, and we border with Wessex Water at Bath, and we actually supply the water to Bath on a transfer between Wessex Water and ourselves. We consume about 80 gigawatt hours of energy a year, and a very large proportion of that is just in pumping. We have about 160 pumping stations in our network. We're also quite lucky. Our network is very flexible, so we can pump water north to south, east to west, but it's expensive to do that. Back in 2012, the company did not have an energy manager or energy project team. Because our energy costs were rising quite rapidly, we also weren't able to understand where our energy was being used across the company. An energy strategy project was implemented, and myself and Martin have been working on it ever since. One of the first goals was really to understand where our energy was being used. In the rest of the presentation, I will sort of touch on the approach the company is taken to meeting ESOS and the challenges we faced implementing our energy strategy since 2012, and our current challenges in meeting ISO 50001. So the early focus of our energy strategy project, as I mentioned, was on the data. We wanted to understand where we were using our energy and apply, tie that in with cost. So one of the main things was we focused on our half-hourly sites, who are our high-consuming sites. So we have about 45 of those. And we went and installed sub-metering, power monitors and all of our large pumps above 40 kilowatts, and replaced old pressure instrumentation and checked our flow instrumentation as well. The reason for doing that was that those three bits of information, power, pressure and flow, would give us our efficiency of our pumps. We also implemented a reporting package so that we could pull together our build energy data with our consumption data from our electricity meters, and also we were able to pull together our power monitor data, pressure and flow data from our telemetry system into the same package. Using that package, we can now report easily on a web page or within a package in our head offices, pump efficiency, our kilowatts per megalitres on various treatment works, pumping stations. So it's quite a big step forward to us, and was clearly helps us meet the requirements of systems such as ESOS and ISO 50001. Our goal to begin with was to head for ISO 50001, but with much longer timescales than what I'm going to talk to you about in the next slide. So when ESOS reared its head, it was initially, there really wasn't much information available, but when the information did come through last year, it was quite clear to us that ESOS wouldn't be the route that we would go down, and that we would stay with the ISO 50001 route. One of the main reasons being is that our electricity consumption, our high consumers are spread across 60 sites, so we would be seeing at least 60 detailed audits for those sites at quite a high cost. We had a quote for one of our sites to carry out an ESOS compliant energy audit, and this came out at £90,000. We were also worried that the audits wouldn't be followed through, so the company would potentially just shelf the audits for 4 years until the next ESOS came through. So we were very keen to embed a system such as ISO 50001 in the business that would make sure that there is a process of continual improvement in the company. Our approach to implementing ISO 50001 has been simply, last year we had a detailed gap analysis, and from that gap analysis we were able to understand what was missing for ISO 50001, and for us it turned out there was a lot missing. We had the basis, what I talked about before. We had the data. We were able to report where our energy consumption was coming from, but we were missing things like staff training, a lot of policy documentation and systems that tied energy management together from board level down to operator level. So for the last year we've been working quite hard in filling those gaps, and it's been quite a hard process because timescales are tight, and we now have to ensure that ISO 50001 is in place for the ESOS deadline, so this has put a lot of pressure on us. We've also got, as the slide says, we don't have a plan B. So if we don't meet ISO 50001, potentially we're going to be in trouble meeting the ESOS deadline. This slide just gives a very brief overview of our current implementation schedule for ISO 50001. We've got our first set of audits in this month, so we're preparing for that at the moment, and our second set of audits are in September. We see that we are definitely not fully ready for compliance at the moment, but we hope that the first set of audits will again provide us a bit of a understanding of where our major gaps are, so we can fill those for September and hopefully meet the ESOS deadline. Our biggest challenges in implementing ISO 50001, resource and time have been the main ones. Some of you may be aware that we're currently under review with the Competitions and Markets Authority due to Ofwat's final determination in our business plan last year. So resources are quite stretched at the moment. However, we do see a lot of opportunities by going down the ISO 50001 route. The company is going through a whole business review. I think ISO 50001 will help us provide savings for the company, but also put a system of continual improvement in place. So we're always looking to save on kilowatt hours and cost. We also see that ISO 50001 fits very well with our wider business plan, which include efficiency and sustainability goals. I think that's it for me. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. I'll now hand over to Andrew Grant.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll just take control of my slides, which I think are on the last one here. Right. So to introduce myself, I'm Andrew Grant, Environment and Audit Manager, AG Bar Soft Drinks. We're an independent company, PLC. Our head office is in Cumbernauld in central Scotland. We have 3 factories in Cumbernauld, in Forfar and in Milton Keynes. And we have 7 distribution branches, Cumbernauld, Milton Keynes, and then smaller branches, Sheffield, Moston, Newcastle, Walthamstow and Wednesbury. We've been in existence quite a long time, over 100 years, and in probably the last 10-20 years, there's been a lot of rationalisation of the number of factories, new installations of lines, which has given us a far greater output. And in terms of the environmental side of things, we've had ISO 14001 since 2003. And we rolled it out to all our manufacturing sites within 12 months of the first certification. So in terms of where we've come from, change my slide. In terms of where we've come from in the past, we have had previous energy surveys and projects which have taken place. We encourage our staff to get involved in CI projects, all types of continuous improvement. And a lot of our people have this as part of their annual objectives, to come up with projects and to work on them. We have things like environmental committee meetings, and we have other forums for suggestions and ideas to be put through. We have undertaken many small-scale free surveys. You're probably quite familiar with these, where you get contacted by a consultant or an organisation that is obviously looking for business in certain areas, and they'll offer you a free survey. Now, we found that those have been, fairly successful, but they tend to because of the nature of them, they tend to just last, 3-4 hours, maybe a day at the very most. And what they're coming up with is things along the lines of LED lighting, putting some sensors, putting some control here and there. and revolving around insulation of pipe work. We've also undertaken some large paid surveys. Now, these have covered some of the larger energy users within the production sites. And examples of those are compressed air. We use both high pressure and low pressure compressed air for our processes. High pressure is used for bottle blowing on our PET or plastic bottle line. So we buy the bottles as what are termed preforms and we blow them. Now, that takes air at just over 30 bar, and we've done some work over the past few years of reducing that to save energy in the bottle blowing. Steam generation is another area where we've had the larger surveys. Steam's used for heating water, particularly within the bottle washer for our returnable bottles, and also within the CIP, the cleaning in place system, which is cleaning all our tank and pipe work. And the most recent one that we got done was looking at our chillers. So we have chillers which will chill water to bring the product down to a temperature where we can carbonate it without any problems, and it's also used for the cooling of the blown bottles as well. So these have had some benefit to us, and some of the energy projects that we've done ourselves, LED lighting in our main warehouse, and within the factory we've gone into low energy lighting as well with sensor control, so the lights are going on and off dependent on the ambient light. Variable speed drives, that's another area. We have a lot of conveyors transporting the bottles after they've been filled to the packing side of things. So variable speed drives and line logic control as well. So what that's doing there is it's detecting, or it's getting a signal that there's a build back, or the signal that say the filler is off, and therefore it will stop the conveyors to save them just running unnecessarily. We have installed energy monitoring systems at our factories, and these we've set up quite a few sub-meters around the process, mainly in those areas where we found that there was a high energy usage. So, for example, the filler itself, the fillers themselves, the packers, which are using a heat tunnel to shrink the shrink-wrap plastic onto the cases. And the energy monitoring system is logging the meter readings every half an hour. So we have a lot of data across all our sites, and I can access any of the sites just through their IP address, log onto the servers, and have a look at what's going on. So we've taken the step to do that. The system isn't perfect at the moment because it very much relies on somebody going in and examining the data rather than the data actually being reported, maybe by exception. So we're looking at reporting systems that we can bolt on to the energy monitoring system. So it's alerting people via email or text message, flagging up, giving reports for our daily production meetings. And as I mentioned before, the reduction in HP air pressure, we've gone from around 34, 35 bar about 10 years ago down to just over 30 now. Now, going on to the perceived benefits of ESOS. We've got some perceived benefits. We haven't had a report yet. The survey is underway. But there were also some concerns to begin with, and I know some of the other speakers have covered this. But what we felt was that it seemed to be just an obligation coming through centrally for all sites subject to the size criteria would have to undertake the ESOS audit and obviously pay for the cost of it. Now there will be benefits from it, no doubt, but we certainly felt that we've had a climate change agreement for some years now, and we've made excellent progress on that. And with ESOS, there doesn't seem to be any consideration taken into account of how the company has actually progressed, how the company is doing, the progress the company has already made. It seems that if you have no good energy practices, you're still subject to the same audit criteria as a company that's been working on things for a long time and has actually shown measurable decreases in their energy usage. So there was that side of things. I think as well, I don't think you get the benefit of being proactive. And that what we're finding as well, I think it might just be down to the fairly tight time scale that the audit has to be done by, and the fact that there's a multitude of consultants all popping up now who are absolutely bombarding our company with correspondence through the mail, phone calls, emails to anyone that will listen to them. And I think there's a concern there as well from discussing things with some of the companies, that there's even a difference of opinion between the lead assessors as to what is actually required for the audit and what is going to satisfy the deck for what is actually a meaningful audit, whether it satisfies the criteria. So there were some concerns there that it was just going to be the main benefactors of this were just going to be all the auditing companies who were going to be racking up lots of nice income from companies that had already done quite a lot of work already, and what were the benefits of what was going to come out of the report. Now, having started off on a negative, I'll go into the positive. We feel that whereas we have had small surveys done and larger ones, but only focusing on certain areas of the process, we're hoping that the ESOS will give us a wider survey, and not just wider, but a holistic approach to the whole process and where we can make the savings and get the benefits, rather than just looking at specific systems in isolation. Because we find a lot of the times with our process that something that you do on one side of the process to make some savings and benefits, there's a downside elsewhere, where maybe something has, you could potentially be shutting something down or knocking it down to a low level, and then when you come to need to ramp it up to take up demand, you find that it takes a while to do that. So there's all sorts of these interlinks between different parts of the process. The other thing that we're hoping is that the audit report will cover industry best practice. We do some benchmarking of other companies that are out there, but you can only do so much, and what you see when you go on a benchmarking visit is only really a small part of it. You see something, but you don't really maybe get all the detail of how it works from day to day. So we're hoping, and again this should be based on the experience of the assessor, is that they will come up with some ideas that are currently in use around the industry and that will benefit from that. The last slide really is just touching on 50,001. Now again, when this came out and within the guidelines there was a statement that 50,001 would probably cover most of the ESOS requirements. We had a look at that just to see what was involved. Having had 14,001, we just wanted to see just what extra information, what extra processes to put in place. We already have the energy monitoring, we're already doing all that recording. We approached LRQA, we've got a quotation for a gap analysis, but we felt that given the time scale for the gap analysis and to implement it, and then obviously for ISO standards to demonstrate you have enough evidence, we felt that it was going to be very tight. And we were concerned that, given the number of companies that were going to be undertaking ESOS audits and the limited number of assessors that would be available, we didn't want to be in a situation towards the second half of the year where we felt that 50,001 would bitten off more than we could chew, and then we're scrambling about trying to get an ESOS audit done before the December the 5th deadline. And the other thing as well is, with having several standards on the go around our sites, 9001, 14001, the BRC Food Safety Standard, all of which have new versions coming out this year, we felt that really we had enough on our plate with getting ourselves up to speed with the new versions of the existing standards, rather than trying to push on with a new standard and everything that entails. So that's an overview of our views on ESOS, how we've approached it. As I say, we're actually undertaking the audit at the moment. We've had about 3 days of site visits by the assessor, provided lots of information from our energy monitoring system as well, and we're just waiting for the report and the analysis to come through to us, and hopefully we'll get some good benefits out of that. So I'll pass you on to Jez now from JPR.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Andrew. So, Jez Rutter from JRP Solutions. you've been obliged to do this this thing called ESOS, whether you've wanted to or not. Listening to previous discussions, that seems very much the case. People seem to have mixed views. So my advice probably is to take and make the best of the process that there currently exists. I'm going to talk to you a bit about why ESOS is only the beginning, how to create a holistic energy plan, ideas on how to implement energy projects, the importance of engaging people in the process, and thinking ahead in terms of your energy strategy. There's a lot to cover in 10 minutes, so please get in touch with us afterwards if you need anything, or put your questions in the question and answer session at the end. Firstly, a very quick introduction to JRP Solutions credentials to show that we know what we're talking about. We're a national organisation working since 1999 for organisations large and small in both public and private sector, but specialising in industry. JRP's personnel are highly qualified and experienced in adding real value to our clients' businesses through managing and actually reducing their energy consumption, with a significant number of real examples of reducing energy consumption by up to 35%. So, whatever you know about ESOS, there are 4 key things to remember. As you only need to survey a representative selection of sites, as we've heard, the opportunities to save energy identified could only be a relatively small proportion of what is available. If opportunities identified are not taken through into delivered improvement projects, then the whole process will have cost you money rather than saved you money, which does seem rather a shame. But really, ESOS is just the beginning of the journey and should be only seen as one step towards achieving energy savings. The best approach to creating energy savings is a holistic energy plan. If you don't know where to begin, the Energy Management Standard ISO 50001 is a great place to start, as it provides a framework of requirements which we'll come back to. If this seems like a daunting task, don't forget you don't have to do this all at once, which most organisations seem to think it's either 50001 or ESOS. Sure, beginning with ESOS, but you can then subsequently deliver 50001 components in stages. You can use the building blocks of the standard and implement these progressively, starting with the areas that give the biggest return on investment. If you'd like more information on this, you can download a handout at the end of the webinar, and a more detailed 15-page handout will be available on request. So the suggestion is to use these building blocks and put together your own specific site or custom company-specific 2 to 3 year plan that suits your business, which should encompass both technical and behavioural projects. And don't stop looking for new projects. Encourage others to do this as well, and ensure that a pipeline of improvement projects is created. When looking for ways to save energy, there is a tendency to look at facilities services and processes, but behavioural change is absolutely critical to achieving results, as we'll demonstrate. Just to show how significant behavioural change can be, I'll use this example of a client of ours that implemented a 480k LED lighting improvement project about a year ago, and have now achieved a demonstrated 7.5% reduction in site consumption from that single project. The same client, though, has then invested just 1/10 of this amount in energy training and achieved the same verified savings, which has been confirmed using IPMVP. So it's an absolute figure taking account of everything. I've talked about the building blocks of ISO 50001, but what are they? Ultimately, there are 7 beneficial operational aspects to a holistic energy management approach. Ideally, you should start by developing a policy as part of a wider plan where the key driver is the more efficient use of energy. You need to quickly move towards identifying both technical and behavioural projects, implement training programs, fixing targets and objectives, using data to better understand and make decisions about energy use, and most importantly, ensure you will later be in a position to measure the results. However, I said ideally you do all of these things. As I've intimated, you can also cherry-pick elements that will lead to the biggest benefit, which in turn will justify moving on to the next element. Before you start implementing energy-saving projects, you need to ensure that you have the answers to some important questions first. For projects listed by a lead assessor, do you understand how accurate the costs and savings are for later putting into business cases? Is further work still required, for instance, to clarify precise quotations and confirm what rigour has been in the energy savings estimates? Is there clarity of prioritisation of projects across sufficient of the estate? At the outset, my strong recommendation would be not to mix technical and behavioural projects in terms of a timeline. And how do you know, without a holistic approach to all projects, whether you're optimising your capital spend? That's assuming you do have a capital budget. If you don't have a capital budget, you can still develop and propose a bundle of realistic projects. Using a selection, I would suggest that if you're in this position, you show proof of projects by using real case studies from your own or more likely from elsewhere. There are a lot of them. Use the same financial approach as if you did have a budget. Make a case study for an energy project pilot. Be in a position to prove the benefits achieved. And after 3 to 6 months, present findings to senior personnel and request a CapEx fund for the next tranche of projects. And then you can continue to optimise and publicise. If you do have a CapEx budget, then a suggested approach is to develop energy business cases, ensuring robust projects are chosen first. Choose the projects with the biggest impact and visibility. Where appropriate, use life cycle costing. As Donald indicated, this isn't always necessary. And implement a bundle of projects at the same time. And for the financial business case, present it as the FD would want to see it. In other words, not too much technical detail. And I turn to engaging stakeholders in the process, of which, of course, the FD is one. And the suggestion would be to start with senior staff members. Almost get in the car yourself and take responsibility for driving the programme yourself, asking for relevant backing. Ensure a programme that contains improvements from multiple sources. Show through case studies the art of the possible, and if possible, roll out as a pilot in one factory or a part of a factory to prove the case, which makes everything much more accountable and meaningful to the senior people. If you haven't opted for ISO 50001 this time round, then the good news is there's plenty of time to achieve certification before the next round, or progress via part implementation each year rather than one big bang. I would also suggest going into more detail identifying projects. Our experience is showing that many organisations are doing the minimal, but at the end of the day, you get out what you put in. So in summary, I'd say there are 5 key messages that I'd like to leave you with today. The first is to use ISO 50001 as a framework as part of a holistic energy plan. ESOS is only a small part of the picture. Give the budget holder information in his or her language. Behaviour is a key to achieving savings, particularly at the outset to get momentum. And importantly, keep the project hopper fed. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jez, and thank you to Martin, Donald, Danny and Andrew also for their presentations. We're reaching the 1 hour mark now, but we'll spend a few minutes just to go through the questions which have come in. And for those questions that we don't get time to address now, we'll post a forum discussion on the 2 Degrees platform, and I'll direct you to that in the follow-up email. So maybe something we can begin with. Martin, somebody here is asking, I know it's early days now, but how is ESOS likely to evolve in the next 4 years? Are you able to give any sort of indication as to the direction of travel?
I'm afraid I really can't at this stage. We will be looking to, we've already commissioned an evaluation of ESOS to see how the first phase runs, and I'm sure there will be scope for improvement in terms of, even if it's just things like the guidance and some of those points that were made by the speaker from Yo Valley. But I can't say in terms of, sort of what the direction of ministers is at the moment. I think the key thing is I don't want to see change for the sake of change, only if there's a sort of clear benefit in terms of clarifying things, making things more straightforward for business. And I think the other thing is, as I said in my own presentation, the one thing which is certain is ESOS is here to stay, and so it is a fixed part of the landscape, but it's at an EU level.
Thanks, Martin. Donald, a quick question here for you. As you've used ISO 14001, did you consider the ISO 50001 route at all?
Yeah, we did consider it, and we haven't ruled it out, but we just didn't think we would have time to implement it in a meaningful way before the ESOS deadline. We're not, as a company, we're not hugely into ISO standards. We're not 9,000 accredited because we're British Retail Consortium accredited. Having said that, we are 14,000. We won't do 50,000 unless we can really see potential additional benefits over and above what we do currently. Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks, Donald. Danny, someone else was asking, did you start from scratch, or did you have ISO 14001 in place when you started?
No, we haven't got ISO 14001 in place. It's something we're actually looking at doing for next year, but we do have ISO 9001 in place. It's actually some of the sort of document management systems that we've got with 9001, which link in with ISO 50001, were in place, and that actually has helped us.
Great, thank you, Danny. Jez, someone else is also, so you touched on this in your presentation about engaging stakeholders, but do you kind of have any tips on the best way to get senior management engaged?
Yes, I kind of tried to allude to it in my presentation. I suppose it depends what angle you're coming from as well, but taking one of several approaches, if you really haven't got the support ahead above you, but you do have some knowledge and capability, then I really do believe, as I've said, that you can get in the car and you can drive it and you can prove it, because the organisations higher up are usually looking for people to take initiative to actually prove things. Looking at it from a slightly different angle, I think demonstrating via case studies of what has been achieved elsewhere and getting real examples. There have been some incredible projects we've been involved with great results. And I just feel that if people could only see some of these projects and therefore believe in what they can achieve. So perhaps getting some senior people out on site visits and looking at case studies would be a very good approach.
Thanks, Jez. So that's kind of all we've got time for now. So we'll draw today's session to a close. I'd like to thank Martin, Donald, Danny, Andrew, and Jez for their time today, and for getting through so many questions, and also for everyone who's joined us for this webinar. Just to remind everyone, a recording of the webinar and the presentation slides will be archived on the 2 Degrees platform, together with the handout that Jez mentioned, and you'll be able to download that. And as soon as all that goes live, I'll send an email out so you've got the links to take you to those. So I hope you found today useful and interesting, and you'll be able to join us for further webinars in the coming months. So thank you, everyone.